The Wainrider or Balchoth War was a long series of battles spread over the first, second, and third millennia of the Third Age. The first of these attacks occurred several centuries after the founding of Gondor. During this period, Gondor was under assault from the east by a number of Easterling tribes variously referred to as Wainriders and Balchoth. Early in the Third Age, Easterling tribes began a series of attacks against the southern Númenórean exile kingdom of Gondor. This first occurred during the reign of King Ostohur, who also rebuilt Minas Aenir in 490 TA. His successor, Romendasil I, defeated an Easterling invasion in TA 500, but was slain in a fresh assault by them in TA 541. His son, Turambar, once again defeated them and captured a large area eastward south of the Sea of Run. Gondor was not troubled by Easterling attacks for centuries afterward, and by the reign of Siriahur Hyermendasil, Gondor was at the height of its power, controlling wide areas to the south and east. Minalcar, regent and later king of Gondor, gave the Northmen extensive lands east of Anduin and south of the Forest of Greenwood the Great. Prior to the battle, in the winter of TA 1635, the Great Plague arrived by dark winds in the northwest of Middle-earth. The heaviest impact struck the kingdoms of Rovanion, which lost half of its people, and Gondor, where in TA 1636 it killed many thousands of its people as well. They were slow to recover, but fortunately, their weaknesses went untested for decades. The Easterlings had also been afflicted, so that the enemies of Gondor struck mainly from the south, or were maritime raiders. But when the Wainriders' invasions began in TA 1851, they involved Gondor in wars that lasted for nearly 100 years. In these conflicts, the Northmen bore the brunt of the first assaults. The Battle of the Plains was fought between the armies of Gondor, led by King Narmasil II, and their allies, the Northmen, and the invading Wainriders. The Wainriders were a fierce and warlike people who rode in chariots and had long been a thorn in the side of Gondor. The battle took place on the plains of Rovanion, near the river Seljuan, also known as the River Running. The armies of Gondor and the Northmen were outnumbered by the Wainriders, who had many chariots and were highly skilled in battle. The battle began with a fierce charge by the Wainriders, who sought to overwhelm the allied forces with their superior numbers and mobility. The war cry of Easterlings filled the sky and Wainrider chariots charged forward, which smashed into the front lines of the Gondorians. The Gondorians, however, had anticipated this tactic and had prepared their defenses accordingly. They had dug trenches and set up stakes to impede the charge of the chariots, and their archers and spearmen were ready to repel the attackers. The Wainriders were skilled charioteers, able to maneuver their deadly vehicles with precision and speed. As they closed in, the Gondorian archers began to shoot arrows. Gondorian front line stood firm, their shields deflecting the projectiles of the Wainriders. The Wainriders then charged their chariots into the Gondorian lines, hoping to break through their defenses. But the spearmen held their ground, thrusting their long spears into the path of the charging chariots. Some of the Wainriders managed to evade the spears and crashed into the Gondorian lines, but were quickly overwhelmed by the spearmen. As the battle raged on, the Wainriders tried different tactics to break through the Gondorian lines. Some charged straight at the spearmen, while others tried to circle around them to attack from behind. But the Gondorians remained steadfast, their spears piercing through the wooden chariots and striking down their riders. The battle continued for hours, with both sides sustaining heavy losses. The Wainriders were determined to breach the Gondorian defenses, but the spearmen held their ground with a fierce determination. The battle reached a fever pitch as the sun began to set, and the Wainriders launched a final, desperate charge. In a last-ditch effort, the Wainriders charged straight at the Gondorian lines, hoping to break through once and for all. But the Gondorian spearmen were ready, and they thrust their spears into the path of the charging chariots. The Wainriders were caught off guard, and many were impaled on the Gondorian spears. Despite the initial setback, the Wainriders continued to fight fiercely, and managed to break through the Gondorian lines in several places. They also sent a large force around the Gondorian left flank, threatening to encircle the army and cut off its retreat. The Wainrider commander now ordered his infantry to move forward and attack the unstable Gondorian front line. Sensing the danger, King Narmacil II ordered the Gondorian infantry to stabilize the front line. The Gondorian swordsmen, dressed in their silver armor, stood firm in their formation, their swords at the ready. They were well trained and disciplined, and their leader had drilled them well. On the other side, the Easterling mace men, dressed in their red and gold armor, charged forward with their massive weapons, their bloodlust driving them forward. As the two armies met in the middle, the mace men swung their weapons with brutal force, smashing through the shields of the Gondorian swordsmen. The Gondorian soldiers tried to stand their ground, but the sheer strength of the mace men was too much for them to bear. The battle quickly devolved into chaos as the two sides clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood. The Gondorian swordsmen fought bravely, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the ferocity of the mace men. Many fell to the ground, wounded or dead, while others fought on with grim determination. The Gondorian leader, seeing that his soldiers were in danger of being completely overrun, ordered his archers to rain arrows down on the Easterling mace men. The arrows whistled through the air, finding their mark in the unprotected gaps in the macemen's armor. The mace men, caught off guard, fell to the ground in droves, their screams filling the air. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Gondorian swordsmen launched a counterattack, driving their swords through the weakened lines of the mace men. The mace men fought back with desperation, swinging their weapons wildly, but it was too late. The Gondorian swordsmen had gained the upper hand, and they pushed forward, cutting down the remaining mace men with ease. At this critical moment, the Wainrider commander unleashed his elite shock troops into the fray. The Easterlings charged forward, their glaives held high, and let out a deafening battle cry. The Gondorians stood their ground, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the two armies drew closer, the sound of metal clashing against metal filled the air. The Easterlings were quick and agile, using their glaives to strike from a distance. They managed to penetrate the Gondorian shields with their long reach, causing chaos among the ranks. The Gondorians responded with swift sword strikes, aiming for the unprotected areas between the armor of their foes. Despite their efforts, the Easterlings continued to make progress, pushing further into the Gondorian lines. At the same time, a fierce engagement developed in the flanks. The Wainrider chariots with the support of Variag lancers crashed into Gondorian flank, threatening to encircle the army. Sensing the danger, King Narmacil personally led the elite Gondorian knights to support the Gondorian flanks. The Wainrider chariots crashed into the Gondorian line with a thunderous roar, the sound of splintering wood and metal ringing through the air. The Gondorian knights stood their ground, their shields up and their swords flashing in the sunlight as they fought back against the chariots. Meanwhile, the Variag lancers were circling around the Gondorian flanks, looking for an opening to strike. They found it in the form of a small group of knights who had become separated from the main force. The lancers charged forward, their spears aimed at the knights' chests. The knights tried to defend themselves, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer speed and ferocity of the lancers. They fell one by one, their armor no match for the sharp tips of the Variag spears. Back on the main battlefield, the Wainrider chariots were wreaking havoc. They plowed through the Gondorian line, scattering knights left and right. But the Gondorians were not to be defeated so easily. They rallied together, forming a wall of steel and muscle that the Wainriders could not penetrate. The chariots were forced to retreat, their wheels creaking and their horses foaming at the mouth. The Variag lancers, having dispatched the Gondorian flanks, now turned their attention back to the main battle. They charged forward, their horses galloping at full speed as they prepared to strike. The Gondorian knights saw them coming and braced themselves for impact. The two forces collided with a deafening crash, the sound of metal on metal ringing through the air. At this very critical moment, King Narmacil of Gondor was slain in a chaotic fight. The death of King Narmacil totally broke the morale of the Gondorian, and they slowly begun to retreat from the battlefield. In order to preserve the remaining Gondorian army, the leader of Northmen, Marhari, decided to fight until the death. The Northmen, who were renowned for their skill with axes and swords, charged forward, letting out a fierce battle cry. They collided with the Easterlings in a cacophony of steel and flesh. The two armies clashed, swords clanging and shields shattering as they fought with all their might. The Easterlings, with their superior numbers, seemed to have the upper hand, pushing the Northmen back. But the Northmen were not easily defeated. They fought with a ferocity born of years of battle, and slowly but surely, they began to gain ground. Marhari's, eyes blazing with determination, led a charge that broke through the Easterlings' ranks, causing them to falter and fall back. The Northmen, outnumbered but not outmatched, fought with everything they had, never giving up even as the Easterlings pressed forward. The clash was brutal and bloody, with neither side giving ground. The Northmen fought with a wild abandon, their fury driving them forward even as they were struck down by the Easterling spears. The Easterlings, for their part, fought with a calm and measured discipline, their skill with the mace and the spear keeping the Northmen at bay. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the Easterlings were gaining the upper hand. Their superior armor and weapons allowed them to withstand the Northmen's attacks, and their precise tactics and disciplined formations allowed them to hold their ground. Despite their bravery and ferocity, the Northmen began to falter, their numbers dwindling with each passing moment. Finally, the elite bodyguards of Wainrider commander charged onto the field. The Northmen were caught off guard by the ferocious charge, and many were trampled under the horses' hooves. The Easterlings took advantage of the chaos, pushing forward and cutting down the Northmen with ease. At last Marhari and the most Northmen laying dead to battlefield, but they brought enough time for the Gondorian army to retreat safely. Finally the battle is over and Easterlings emerge victorious. The battle was a disaster for Gondor. The king was slain, and the lands east of the river Anduin were abandoned, save Ithilien. Narmacil was succeeded by his son Calameter. However, the forces of Gondor did inflict enough damage to the Wainriders to prevent any deeper incursion into Gondor. Instead, the invaders completed their conquest of Rovanion. As for the Northmen, a few fled over the river Seljuin and merged with the people of Dale. Some took refuge in Gondor, and others were gathered under the leadership of Marwini, son of Marhari.